38 days, 15 hours, 52 minutes into the 36th expedition to the International Space Station. Right now, the station is in good shape, currently flying 259 miles above the central Atlantic Ocean. Right now on a course headed for the coast of northern Portugal. Will then overfly southern and eastern Europe before heading into western Asia. On board right now, the Expedition 36 crew members are all off on a variety of different tasks. Station Commander Pavel Vinogradov, seen seated on the left in this crew portrait, is conducting a photographic inspection of all of the windows in the Russian segment of the space station. That's a normal and periodic maintenance task. While Flight Engineer Chris Cassidy is setting up a camera in the Quest airlock to view next month's spacewalk preparations for the planned 2 American spacewalks that are on the schedule for July. Flight Engineer Luca Parmitano is doing some proficiency training on the optical tomography hardware, while Flight Engineer Karen Nyberg is finishing a checkout of that optical tomography experiment hardware. In the meanwhile, flight engineers Alexander Mazurkin and Fyodor Yurchikhin are closing out from today's suited spacewalk exercise, one of the final steps in their preparation for Monday's EVA, which will get started about 8:35 Houston time on Monday morning. They finished up the suited part of that exercise about 7:40 this morning and are now getting the area in the Piers docking compartment cleaned up. They'll be back at work for their preparations again on Sunday. And coming up here at about 10:15 this morning, we're going to talk with this expedition's spacewalk manager and get a preview of Monday's spacewalk.
Okay, it's no problem. If you need longer than that, it's fine too. Just let us know. Copy all.
Hey, we copy that, and we'll let you know if we want to run longer. Thank you.
Also, none of us are checking the battery status on those regularly, so if you see it cut off, please call up. It might just be the AA batteries conked out on the wireless setup.
Hey, we copy. Good words. Thank you.
You're looking at a live view in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, located at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. Members of the Orbit 2 team are on console this morning, working with the crew members through the latter portion of their workday as they wrap up this work week. The team this morning is led by Flight Director Chris Edelin. To Mr. Edelin's right, the spacecraft communicator on the shift today is Leslie Ringo. She's the voice that you just heard, talking with Flight Engineer Chris Cassidy as he works through the continued setup operations that he's involved with right now in the U.S. airlock. Crew members got their workday started with their regular 1 a.m. Central Time wake-up call today. Several of the crew members before breakfast even having experiment operations, both urine and blood draw requirements for some human life sciences investigations. The samples to be drawn on a periodic basis. And
thinking about doing a little organization. Right now there's two 2.0 CTBs, Marshburn and Hadfield ECOC stuff. And while I have some time, I was thinking about converting those into Parmitano Cassidy CTBs and putting the stuff that Luca and I will need for the upcoming EVAs in those CTBs and just shuffling stuff around. And I had a question if that would be okay. And also along the same lines, will I be using the same LCVG that I used a couple weeks ago, or am I supposed to get out a new LCVG? And this goes into the whole shuffling bag thing around, kind of ties all together.
Okay, Chris, we copy all. We're going to need a couple minutes to get an answer to you.
Okay, thanks.
Chris Cassidy with several questions for the EVA officers here in Mission Control as he's at work inside the airlock. As we mentioned, that he and Luca Parmitano are targeted to conduct a couple of spacewalks during the month of July. Still well in advance, but Cassidy is also ahead of his work schedule for the day-to-day and is asking for some guidance about how to take care of some equipment to make sure that things are where they need to be for those tasks next week. Most of the spacewalk preparations on board the station of late have been directed toward the Russian spacewalk that's going to take place this coming Monday. Veteran spacewalker Fyodor Yurchikhin and first-time spacewalker Alexander Mazurkin are scheduled to exit the Piers docking compartment a little after 8:30 Houston time this coming Monday morning for about a 6-hour spacewalk. They've been spending almost all of their time this past week getting ready for that spacewalk in the sense that they have been studying up on the procedures that they will have to follow and reviewing the task list, but also doing a lot of work checking out the spacesuits that they will wear, the Orlan spacesuits that will be their life support and their personal spacecraft while they're outside the vehicle next week. That continued with a suited run today, where the two spacewalkers actually got in those spacesuits to conduct a series of checks. They got started with that about 4:40 Houston time this morning, checking out the systems in the suit, and then they started to put on the different gear that they'll wear. Their entry into the suits began about 6:25 Houston time this morning, which they
for a go back on the foam at your convenience, Karen. Go ahead. Hey, Karen, after reconsideration, we realized that the foam will not be able to fit back in the CTB with the OCT, and so we have a forward plan for that foam, actually all the foam that was around the OCT. And so if you're ready to copy, I have some words for you of where to stow it. Go ahead. Okay, we're going to want you to go grab a JSB and label it 4030. And so what you'll do is you'll take all the foam out of the triple CTB and you'll put it in that JSB. And the location you'll stow the JSB will be in the PMM end cone for trashing later. Copy that.
The preparations for today's suited run move to Yurchikhin and Mazurkin climbing into their Orlan spacesuits just before 6:30 Houston time this morning. The Russian spacesuit has a large door that is the back of the suit that opens up on a hinge, and the spacewalkers crawl in legs first. Then the door is closed behind them. Once inside, they conducted a series of tests of the controls of the suit themselves, as well as leak checks to make sure that the suits were airtight. Then they were pressurized so that the crew members could check to see how the suits fit while they were at pressure, which could be different than when they are not at pressure. And once that was completed, about 7 o'clock Houston time this morning, they conducted a translation training exercise, practiced moving about inside the airlock, but while inside the suits and while they were at pressure. That was all completed, as we say, a little after 7:30 Houston time this morning. Yurchikhin and Mazurkin got the go then to exit their suits. They're currently working on the last of the tasks involved in this today, which is to close out all of the suit components and to reinstall air ducting back into the Piers docking compartment. Later, early this afternoon, they'll also be installing some new, what are known as replaceable elements inside that spacesuit in order to get it properly outfitted for the spacewalk that'll take place on Monday morning. A reminder that NASA television coverage of the Russian spacewalk will begin at 8 o'clock Central Time on Monday morning. You'll be able to follow along here on NASA television as well as on the internet at nasa.gov and follow the spacewalk, the last stages of the preparation of the spacewalk on Monday morning, leading up to the planned start time of Monday's spacewalk at 8:35 a.m. The spacewalk is on the books to last just a little over 6 hours. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk with the Increment 36 EVA manager and get a preview of the tasks that are on that 6-hour list for Fyodor Yurchikhin and Alexander Mazurkin. We mentioned that this is, of course, Mazurkin's first spacewalk on his first space flight. Fyodor Yurchikhin has almost 32 hours of spacewalk experience over the course of 5 previous spacewalks. 3 of those took place when he was the station commander on Expedition 15. And one of those spacewalks was conducted inside a U.S. suit, a spacewalk that he conducted in July of 2007 with his crewmate Clay Anderson. His other 2 Expedition 15 spacewalks, as well as one each in Expedition 24 and Expedition 25, were all conducted in the Russians' Orlan suit. It's a busy summer of spacewalks on board the International Space Station that kicks off next week when Fyodor Yurchagin and Alexander Mazurkin go outside the Russian segment of the International Space Station. It's the first of 4 spacewalks that are currently on the plan for Expedition 36. To talk more about what is going to happen on Monday, I'm joined by Lawrence Thomas, who is the Increment 36 EVA manager. I mentioned a moment ago that Fyodor Yurchagin has got a great deal of experience spacewalking, Mazurkin none at all. Is that a routine thing to put a very experienced spacewalker with a rookie?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much standard. As with most things, when you do something for the first time, you tend to make mistakes. So one way to help mitigate that issue is to do it with somebody who's done it before. From an EVA perspective, not only is it beneficial to have an experienced crew member there on the day of the EVA, but that means they probably trained together leading up for the increment itself. So that allows the senior crew member to help the new guy learn the tricks of the trade, figure out the right way to do things, and teach him the pitfalls and the things that he wants to look out for when he's doing his EVAs.
In this case, they have yet another experienced spacewalker in Pavel Vinogradov, who's there as well to help them get ready.
Absolutely.
Most of the work here on Monday is going to be around the Zarya module. Walk us through what the tasks are for Monday.
So there's basically 2 tasks on Zarya as part of Monday's EVA. The first one is going to be replacing a regulator panel that has expired in the Russian cooling system, so they're going to change that out and bring the old one back inside. And also they're going to be installing some cable clamps and Fairleads in preparation for the next Russian EVA. During Russian EVA 34 that's planned for August 15th, the crew's going to be routing some cables that will eventually provide power and data for the Russian MLM module that will launch later this year. So we're going to need these clamps and Fairleads to secure those cables to station. Because
Zarya is the path for those for power and data and other things that are coming from the U.S. segment of the station to this new module, right?
Correct.
And the first piece of hardware that they're working on, you said it is expired. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work, right?
Correct. It's just it's reached the end of its life, and it's preventative maintenance. They want to go out there. Obviously, coolant's very important on the space station, so they want to make sure they take care of that problem before it becomes a problem.
In all of these tasks, is this a lot of is it easy installations, comparatively speaking, or are these hard installations?
Well, I would say for the tasks for this EVA in particular, there's not one that's particularly hard in comparison to other things that we've done. One thing that I've always admired about Russian EVA hardware is they always design it to where it's very user-friendly, very simple interfaces, very intuitive. So I don't see anything on this that's more complicated. If I was to pick anything out that to watch out for these EVAs, is just the amount of ground they're going to cover during this EVA, and also the amount of hardware they're going to manipulate. The crew's going to be up and down Zarya. They're going to be on the PHO. They'll be on the service module. They're going to be on MRM2 and DC1, so they're going to cover a lot of ground during this EVA. I think the only module they won't be on the Russian segment is MRM1. In addition, there's a lot of hardware they're going to be manipulating, a lot of things they have to actuate, a lot of cable clamps they have to install, so a lot of hand-intensive tasks. So if I was going to say if there's anything to watch out for in this EVA, is just, to see if the crew start having some hand fatigue as we start getting closer to the end of the EVA.
You mentioned that a big part of this work here is installing clamps for cables that are to come later. There's still more work after this in order to get ready for, not for this EVA, but there is additional future work to get ready for this new module, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's quite a bit of tasks that need to be performed by the Russian EVA crew members before MLM arrives. Not only do they need to route power and data cables and reconfigure Kurs equipment for the arrival of the MLM itself, but it's part of a larger reconfiguration effort because the MLM is going to end up going where DC-1 is now, which is the Russian airlock. So MRM-2 is going to become the new Russian airlock once DC-1 is deorbited to make room for MLM. So there's a lot of hardware that we're going to have to move around. There's EVA hardware on the DC-1 that will have to be removed and reinstalled on MRM-2. There's some antennas that we're going to have to be moved around, and there's also some science equipment on DC-1 that's going to have to be relocated before it deorbits.
So we look forward to those things coming up in Russian spacewalks, but not on Monday.
Correct.
For Monday spacewalk, they have work on other modules besides Zarya? What are the other tasks that they're looking at?
So they have a couple of tasks on MRM2. They have a new piece of science hardware called Indicator, which is part of a larger experiment that's going to be measuring different aspects of the ISS environment. So they'll be installing that piece of hardware. They're also going to be retrieving a Venoslavos panel that has a bunch of science samples on it. So they'll be bringing that back inside.
That's another one of those exposure experiments?
Exactly. There's several of those on the Russian segment, and this is another one they want to bring back inside. On the service module, they're going to be reconfiguring some Kurs connections. They want to do a Kurs hardware test on the PHO in preparation for MLM arrival, make sure it's working properly. They're also going to be installing some cable or some gap spanners around the service module to just help in crew translation for future EVA tasks. And they're also going to be retrieving another payload, which is called the photon gamma experiment, and bringing that back inside. And that's just making room for another activity that will be coming later.
So that's to make room for, that's a future task, future spacewalk task.
Absolutely.
Are there, as you look at it as an EVA professional, are there tasks here that are particularly difficult or particularly easy for spacewalkers? I mean, not for you and me. But,
right, absolutely. You know, they go through a lot of training for all this stuff, so a lot of times, a lot of these items are second nature before they get on orbit. You know, as I said earlier, I don't think there's any one particular thing on these EVAs that I would specify as particularly difficult. It's just the amount of work that they're doing, the amount of ground they're covering, and just making sure that you know, they take their necessary breaks when they need to keep from getting hand fatigue and worn out towards the end of the EVA.
Hopefully, we get interesting to see a lot of these areas too, because they're both going to be wearing U.S. helmet cameras.
Absolutely. You know, it's, you know, the Russian side borrows a lot of our U.S. hardware for EVAs on a periodic basis, and the helmet cameras are one that sometimes they use it, sometimes they don't. On a lot of recent EVAs, they've been both crew members will be using our helmet cameras, but sometimes there's a window in the top of the Orlan suit, and so yeah, sometimes they want to be able to use that window, and the helmet cameras block that view. So, you know, if they know that they're going to need to use that window on the top of the Orlan, then they will not use the helmet cameras for that EVA.
And the Russian suit is not designed with lights or cameras on it as the U.S. suit is.
Exactly. We've made some adaptations so that they can fit on the Orlan for these EVAs. They found it beneficial, and we like to have it on the Orlans too, so that we can get a sneak peek of what's going on.
I mentioned earlier too that there are a couple of U.S. spacewalks that are on the plan currently for the month of July. Can you give us just the Reader's Digest version of what are we looking for Chris Cassidy and Luca Parmitano to be doing?
Absolutely. I think that the upcoming U.S. EVAs are very similar to this next Russian EVA in the aspect that there's not one major task that we're doing that's going to, you know, keep us at one work site for a long period of time, or is going to be, you know, taking up the majority of the EVA. There's a lot of smaller tasks that they're going to be doing. The crew's going to be doing a lot of translation. They'll be covering most of the U.S. segment during these two EVAs. Just kind of hitting the highlights on some of the tasks we're going to be doing. They're going to be replacing a space-to-ground transceiver controller to help provide redundancy back to that system. They're going to be deploying 2 radiator grapple bars that arrived on SpaceX-2. They're currently sitting on the POA. So they're going to have to go and put them in their permanent stowage location, one on P1, one on S1. And those will be used if we have a radiator failure in the future, so we can change out the radiators. They're going to be retrieving 2 science experiments, the Missy-8 and the ORM-8, off of ELC-2, and they'll bringing that back inside so it can be returned to the ground.
More of those exposure experiments like the Russians.
Exactly. They're going to be routing the U.S. side, or completing routing the U.S. side of the MLM power and data cables. And they'll also be retrieving a camera that has failed on the SSRMS mobile base system. That's kind of the highlights and the big ticket items that we're going to be doing over the 2 EVAs.
And it shows the connection too. You say they're going to be routing the cables from the U.S. segment up to Zarya so that later Russian spacewalkers can come get them and string them along through the clamps that are being installed on Monday.
Absolutely. So it all ends up tying together.
All one big space station.
Exactly.
Lawrence, thanks very much. It's look forward to seeing what Fyodor and Sasha have as what they get to do on Monday.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Lawrence Thomas is the Increment 36 EVA manager. This is Mission Control Houston. The International Space Station's Expedition 36 crew is wrapping up a busy week on orbit, one in which they have split most of their attention between things coming in and things going out. The station received more than 7 tons of supplies when the automated transfer vehicle number 4 docked to the Zvezda module on June 15th. Station Commander Pavel Vinogradov and European Space Agency astronaut, flight engineer Luca Parmitano opened the hatch to the Albert Einstein on June 18th, and the crew members started unloading the cargo, which included materials ranging from new hardware, like a new water pump assembly for the Columbus Laboratory module, to science experiment material, like the phases investigation, which looks into how emulsions maintain their structures in microgravity, as well as clothes and other supplies for the crew members themselves, along with air and water and propellant. The unloading operations on the European Space Agency provided cargo vehicle continued throughout the week. So did preparation for 2 crew members to exit the station on Monday, June 24th. Flight engineers Alexander Mazurkin and Fyodor Yurchikhin will be going outside next week to replace a fluid flow control valve panel on the exterior of the Zarya module, to install clamps there for later cables that will route power from the U.S. segment of the station to a new Russian laboratory module, which is expected to arrive on orbit late this year. They're also going to remove and install experiments on the exterior of the Zvezda module and inspect and take samples of thermal insulation on the outside of the Russian modules. All week long, they and their crewmates have been getting ready for that spacewalk. Yurchikhin and Mazurkin studied the timeline. They've gotten familiar with the work sites through the use of graphics in a computer training program. They've checked out the integrity of the Orlan spacesuits that they'll wear and outfitted those suits with all the necessary equipment, including helmet lights and cameras that are borrowed from the U.S. spacesuits. On Friday, they got in their Orlan suits and completed a training exercise as one of their final preparations for the spacewalk, which is scheduled to begin on Monday the 24th at 8:30 a.m. Houston time. This week, the crew members worked with a variety of experiments, too. On Monday, flight engineer Chris Cassidy took part in the first ever test of how well a crew member on orbit can remotely control a robot on the surface of the heavenly body about which he or she is operating. For this test, Cassidy sent commands to a rover that was located on the ground at the Ames Research Center in California, and developers are working out bugs in the system, a system that's intended to help an astronaut who's flying around the moon or an asteroid or some other body use remote control to explore those worlds or to build structures on them that will support future human explorers. Throughout the week, Cassidy, Parmitano, and flight engineer Karen Nyberg worked with the spinal ultrasound experiment. Investigators want to know more about how an astronaut's spine is impacted by being in weightlessness, and they use ultrasound to gather data throughout the mission. It'll be studied along with data that is gathered pre-flight and post-flight for comparison's sake. The spinal ultrasound experiment also has the added benefit of developing the technology and examination techniques that can be used by people on the Earth in areas of the planet that don't have access to a large and expensive MRI machine to do the same thing. Crew members had a couple of chances during the week to talk directly to us Earthlings about what they're doing on orbit. On Tuesday, Parmitano conducted an interview with Euronews about the arrival of the European cargo ship and his early experiences on board the station. And on Wednesday, Cassidy and Nyberg answered questions about life on orbit from students who are gathered at the Kansas Cosmosphere. Each day throughout the week, Vinogradov and his crew also took care of themselves and their ship. They spent a couple of hours each day exercising to maintain their overall physical fitness and to fight off the harmful effects of spending a prolonged period of time in low Earth orbit environment. They also conducted the routine maintenance on station systems to keep all of them in good shape to support their science mission. And the weekend, they'll all get a chance for some off-duty time to rest up, to have conferences with their families on Earth, but also to get ready for the focal point of Monday, a 6-hour spacewalk outside the Russian segment of the International Space Station. Now getting a look at the activity inside the Destiny Laboratory. This is a live view of flight engineer Chris Cassidy at work there. Beyond him is the hatchway into the Unity module. We're looking aft of the station, the front end of the station, the Node 2, along with the Columbus Laboratory module and the Kibo Laboratory modules are all behind the camera in its current location. As you look through the hatchway, it goes into the Unity module. To the left, in our view, is where the U.S. airlock, the Quest module, is located. To the right in Unity is node number 3, the Tranquility module. That's where the crew members' exercise equipment is located. Also the toilet in the U.S. section of the station, and the and in that same module where we just saw Chris Cassidy go is also the module that is filled with windows and allows the crew members to get a full horizon to horizon view down at the planet Earth. If you don't turn and go straight through Unity, go through that pathway that's lined with white storage bags, you move into the Russian segment of the space station, first into the Zarya module. It's on the exterior of the Zarya where a good bit of the work in Monday's spacewalk will be taking place. Flight engineer Luca Parmitano moving through from the forward end of the station. Now he's in the central portion of the station at the in the Unity module. He appears to be talking to Cassidy or one of the other crew members who are off in Tranquility, which is on the port side of the station. This is a look at the team of flight controllers at the Johnson Space Center in Houston who are working with the International Space Station crew today, which is although it's morning in Houston, it's the middle to the late portion of the afternoon on board the International Space Station, where they operate on Greenwich Mean Time. We're watching Chris Cassidy in the Destiny module, the U.S. lab, along with all of the other things there. It's also the location of the stationary bicycle, which is located there where Cassidy is now. It's one of the several ways in which crew members have to exercise and maintain their physical fitness. There's what is known as the CVIS here in the U.S. segment of the station. A similar piece of equipment in the Russian segment of the station that's known as a veloergometer. In the Tranquility module, which is through that hatch and to the right, the advanced resistive exercise device is located. That gives crew members their best chance at in essence doing weightlifting and really putting some load on their bones, as well as working out their muscles with some serious resistance. Also in the Tranquility module is a treadmill known as T2. It was the second treadmill on the station where crew members run. There's a graphic shows the components there of the COLBERT treadmill, the combined operational load-bearing external resistance treadmill. There is a similar piece of equipment in the Russian segment of the station, actually a second-generation treadmill that's located there now, that's known as the BD2 or BD2, which was recently installed in the floor of the Zvezda module in place of the original station's exercise equipment, the original treadmill, which is known as TVIS. TVIS has been removed and is being prepped for ultimate removal from the station and ultimate disposal. Still is on board the station, though, at this point. We've mentioned that the crew members on board the International Space Station have been making preparations for a spacewalk on Monday, in which Fyodor Yurchikhin and Alexander Mazurkin will be spending 6 hours or so outside the station to do a variety of tasks. The EVA specialists here in Houston have put together a nice piece, helped the Public Affairs Office put together something that will show the areas that are going to be worked on while explaining what those tasks are. EVA Officer Devin Balch is the voice that you hear here as we look through the tasks that are on the schedule for the Russian EVA coming up on Monday.
Fyodor Yurchikhin will be EV1 wearing the red striped suit. Alexander Sasha Mazurkin will be EV2 wearing the blue striped suit. They will egress the Pirs or DC-1 module. Sasha will be the first crew member out. Fyodor will hand out the indicator science hardware along with the pressurized container, and he will follow. The two crew members will translate around DC-1 to Strela 1's boom and translate up to the service module and FGB interface. Fyodor will hold the pressurized container, while Sasha translates up to a Kurs connector panel There he will connect a series of connectors to test out the Kurs hardware. Once that's complete, he will inform MCC Moscow that he has connected the connectors. He will translate back to the pressurized container, and along with Fyodor, will translate up to the FGB and attach the pressurized container to the FGB latching platform. They will open up an MLI panel and disconnect panel number 2 flow control valve on the FGB. They will remove number 2 flow control valve and temp stow it. Open up the pressurized container and retrieve the spare flow control valve and install it on the FGB, and remating the connector. They will stow the failed flow control valve in the pressurized container. Once that's complete, they will install cable clamps along the FGB to be utilized for a future EVA. They will retrieve the pressurized container and translate back towards DC-1. They will install an additional cable clamps along their way. Once that's complete, Sasha will translate back to the Kurs connector panel and demate the connectors that he mated prior to this. The test should be complete at this time. The crew members will translate back down to Strela 1's boom, and back around DC-1 to temp stow the pressurized container. They will retrieve the indicator science hardware with the science hardware. They will translate back up to Strela 1's boom to MRM2. Here they will install indicator science hardware on MRM2. Once it's installed, the indicator science hardware will be deployed, and a connector from the indicator science hardware will be mated to MRM2. The crew members will then translate around MRM2 to retrieve Vyacheslavo's panel. They'll translate back down Strela 1's boom, back to DC-1 and the EVA ladder. Back at DC-1, they will translate to the EVA ladder and stow Vinoslavost panel number 2 and the pressurized container inside DC-1. They will translate out to the SM or service module and install a series of gap spanners between handrails to be utilized on a future EVA. After the gap spanners are installed, they will demate 2 connectors from photon gamma from the monoblock and remove photon gamma from the monoblock after installing an MLI cover. They'll translate to the smaller diameter of the service module and temp stow photon gamma, then translating around the smaller diameter of the service module, they will install 2 additional gap spanners. Once the gap spanners are installed, the crew members will translate back to photon gamma, retrieve it, and translate it back to DC-1, where Fyodor will ingress, retrieve photon gamma, stow it inside DC-1, and Sasha will follow, ingressing DC-1 and closing the hatch. This would conclude Russian EVA 33.
A good close-up look at some of the work sites where Fyodor Yurchikhin and Alexander Mazurkin will be busy for 6 hours or so this coming Monday. NASA TV coverage on NASA TV and on nasa.gov of Monday Spacewalk all begins at 8 o'clock Houston time this coming Monday, June 24th. Hatch opening for the first spacewalk of Expedition 36 is targeted for 8:35 a.m. The Expedition 36 crew members are in the last few hours of their work day and of their work week.
Leslie, I went through that whole cycle and got the same error message.
Okay, we copy.
Flight engineer Karen Nyberg talking with spacecraft communicator Leslie Ringo. Nyberg has been working on hardware checkout of the optical tomography hardware, which is newly arrived on board the space station. Her crewmate Chris Cassidy has been ahead of his scheduled work all day long today, and he's currently working out on the Cevis stationary bicycle located in the station's Destiny laboratory, while the other U.S. segment crew member, Luca Parmitano of Italy, the Italian Space Agency, is also ahead of his scheduled work task and has been out of sight. So exactly he is working on removing some hardware that he's been wearing for a life sciences experiment. He's been wearing a digital walk halter ECG and an ActiWatch that's been saving data as he's been moving. In fact, a 48-hour data save is just wrapping up for Parmitano. This particular experiment, known as biological rhythms, is gathering data from hardware that crew members wear, that it is recorded and then later downlinked to the ground for a study by the investigators who are looking into all aspects, all that they can think of how the human body responds to being in an environment where there's no gravity and things are not the way that the human body expects them to be, that human bodies have evolved for them to be. Crew members are also participating in experiments in which they are eating certain things to see how that may respond. They take blood and urine samples, sometimes on a daily basis for short periods of time, for them to be studied later to find out how their bodies are processing the things that they do eat and drink. It's all part of the experiment, is to find out how people can survive in this environment for extended periods of time, such as the periods of time that will be required for the exploration missions of the future, which will require far more than just the 6 months in space that station crew members are currently spending. Station crew is working toward its second daily planning conference of the day at 1:55 Houston time this afternoon. They'll be checking in with all of their flight control teams, and then follow that up at 2:20 this afternoon with the standard weekly conference with their lead flight director, Gary Horlocker, here in the Mission Control Center here in Houston. They then will be wrapping up their day, looking for a scheduled start to their sleep period at 4:30 Houston time this afternoon. The weekend ahead is offering some a good bit of time off duty, although the first thing on Saturday morning for all of the crew members is a weekly house cleaning, most thorough house cleaning that's done on orbit, about a 3-hour period that's set aside for all of the crew members through the division of tasks to do a very thorough scrubbing of surfaces inside the space station, to clean filters, and to help maintain the efficient operation of all of the station's equipment. Crew members also, of course, have exercise sessions throughout the weekend as well, each day of the weekend. But otherwise, they will be off duty on Saturday. On Sunday, they all have an opportunity, one at a time, for private conferences with their families. And on Sunday, they also have the final preparations that'll take place for the Monday Spacewalk. Among those on Sunday will be the closing of the hatch to the automated transfer vehicle. That's required to be closed as part of the proper setup of the station to deal with the structural loading. The crew will close the hatch into the ATV on Sunday afternoon, and the hatch will be reopened then again on Tuesday morning after the spacewalk concluded. Coming up on NASA television, here at the top of this hour, we'll have today's NASA TV video file with a look at activity all over the nation's space program. That's coming up here at 11 o'clock Central Time. And our coverage of Monday's Spacewalk will begin at 8 a.m. Houston Time, 8 o'clock Central Time, this coming Monday morning, before the scheduled hatch opening at 8:35. At a mission elapsed time of 38 days, 16 hours, and 50 minutes into the International Space Station's Expedition 36, this is Mission Control, Houston.